All right, well, my time says it's 12 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started here. If we have a few late people joining us, by all means, we got a few things to cover with introductions and outline for today so that I don't think they'll miss too much. My name is Jim Jansen. I work as an agricultural economist here and welcoming you to the last Land Management Quarterly of 2025. And today's presentation will be led by myself, and Anastasia Meyer will be taking over the second half of the presentation. And if you'd like to find information on either of us or some of the things we contribute to, by all means, visit the links below. And I will remind everyone that that email and phone number are our direct contacts. So please feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to get back to you in a timely manner. I know I have a few emails here I need to get back to from last week. But please let me know if there's anything we can do for anyone that's joining us. All right, so first part that we're going to cover today, brief outline. We're going to be taking a look at the recently published 2025 USDA county level cash rents. And we'll also be taking a look a little bit at some of the farm policy surrounding the ARC and PLC programs. Anastasia will be taking the second lead today, talking a little bit about closing out the leases, things to be thinking about towards the end of the leases, looking forward to 2026. And then we will also review any questions that get submitted as we're going along. We didn't have any submitted, so we pulled a couple. And also, if you have any questions as we're going along, you can go ahead and enter those into the question pane here on Zoom, and we'll stop and answer those as time permits as we keep. So first thing I want to point out, the cash rental rates that will be discussed in the next series of 4 slides, I believe. These are coming from the USDA, their division called the National Agricultural Statistics Service. They're a division that covers the entire United States and follows different statistics related to crop yields, cash rents, livestock inventories, crop harvest progress, all those types of things. And with their information, I've seen this slide in the past. In recent years, they've been doing this survey in odd numbered years, but in the last couple of years, it seems like they've been doing this survey every year. Their survey, I think, is conducted a little bit later than what the University of Nebraska does. And their information, their analysis is actually published in late August. And then in the past, we've seen some of these county level maps. You probably remember seeing them or maybe even have a few on file. Just know that the raw information is available at the link, the first link that you see on this slide. And with the government shutdown and some of those processes that slowed down a little bit during the shutdown, I have not seen the USDA publish a Nebraska level map. So some of the folks here at the Center for Ag Profitability, we tried to put together the following 3 maps to hopefully provide you with some information on cash rental rates across Nebraska. And I will remind everyone, the second link right here, the university did not publish this information. We're simply publishing a map of the information that was compiled by the United States Department of Agriculture. So here on the next slide, we're going to have 3 slides available here. And if you're joining us right now, you're going to see that there's a link on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide that says go.unl.edu/NASS. That'll actually take you to the short article that I referenced on the prior slide. And it also gives you a nice breakdown. You can pull down this map in addition to the 2 following maps. We tried to make these numbers as large as possible so you could hopefully read them. I know it's always hard to see these things. But so for the non-irrigated, or what's commonly referred to as dry land county level cash rents, the dry land cropland cash rents, we see the breakdown here. And you'll notice some of the counties are in gray. There was not a number provided because they simply didn't have enough responses. So if you think about things, say, for example, some of the major ranching areas out here in the Sandhills, obviously there's not an immense amount of row crops. There might be some row crops, but to the degree that you could get enough people to respond to the survey, there weren't enough estimates provided. And also in some of these counties where there's a high proportion of the acres irrigated, we may not see a response either. So we have our breakdown here. And I like to refer to this slide because remember the university publishes their regional based information It's projected to come out the second week of March for 2026. But two things about this. At least you can step back and kind of see where cash rents are in your county, compare maybe against the map that you might have or what you might be receiving or what you might be paying. But two, the other thing that I like about it is let's pick on Northeast Nebraska here for a minute. You can see how cash rents vary around. So example, we look at Cumming and Thurston County versus Boone and Antelope County. This is the Northeast District here. These cash rents almost vary $100 an acre or even over $100 an acre from the high down to the low, a little less than 100 in the case of Boone, but more than 100 between Antelope and Cumming. Use this as your cookie cutter slide. Think about it as how do cash rents vary around in my areas? Say for you're in the Northwest, it looks to me that Garden and Dual and Cheyenne and the county north here too, those might be closer to the upper third of cash rents. Maybe Dawes and Banner and Kimball are closer to the lower third, and maybe Morrill is closer to the overall average. Kind of use this as a benchmark to see how cash rents vary around based on what information is available. Onto the irrigated cash rents, you'll notice once again in certain pockets of the Sand Hills, also portions of southeast Nebraska where there's not a high proportion of irrigated cash rents, they do not produce an average. And the other thing I'll say, especially along Interstate 80 here, where we get into some of this heavily irrigated cropland, you'll notice we do not, in this information that's published, the information does not distinguish the difference between center pivot as well as gravity or flood irrigated. And with that being said, we have a breakout here of cash rents that are a weighted average. So for example, in Hamilton County, let's say a third of the acres are center pivot irrigated. Well, if that's the case, the average here is going to be a reflection of the proportion of acres that are gravity irrigated versus center pivot. In gravity irrigated acres, based on the University of Nebraska information, they tend to rent on average maybe $30 to $50 an acre less than what center pivot rates do. So that's a breakdown on the irrigated. And on to the grazing land. Now you'll notice there are definitely pockets of eastern Nebraska where unfortunately we didn't have enough responses. I know there's grazing land in Holt County. I know there's grazing land in Kimball County. The thing to keep in mind though is if there's not enough people responding to a survey, so if you're someone that likes this information, you have to respond to the survey. And this is for the summer grazing season. This is an annual rate. In addition, the center pivot as well as the dry land or non-irrigated rental rates, those are a seasonal or excuse me, an annual rate. The only monthly rate that we report here at the University of Nebraska is the cow-calf pair rental rate on a monthly basis. So this is a breakdown that we see here on cash rents. And once again, the differences in rainfall, soil type, all the different factors or forces we talk about that influence cash rents are some of those that are present here on this slide. And you know, generally speaking, the farther east you go in each of the districts, okay, let's pick on the Southwest district here. The farther east you move, so these three counties here might be closer to the upper third of cash rent. Some of these counties on the western part may be closer to the lower third of cash rent that the university reports. And Hayes and Hitchcock might be closer to the overall average, for example. Why is that? Well, when you move southeast, excuse me, when you move from the southeast to the northwest, we tend to get a less rainfall. So farther east you move, the more rain you get on average. The farther west you move, the less rain you get. So that's why we see a breakdown that we do on the cash rents that we have present on this slide, or one of the factors that contribute to that. And I'm going to highlight some analysis that was conducted by Brad Lubin here at the University of Nebraska. He's a farm policy specialist and also does some farm income modeling with respect to the different programs at the aggregate level for the state of Nebraska. And some of these slides, except for the last two in this particular session, I pulled from a recent webinar that was also conducted and archived. And you can go, I actually stuck the little link down here on the bottom of the slide. So by all means, you can go on there and find the webinar for the fall of 2025 that we had that was jointly hosted by the University of Missouri with the Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center, and gives you a breakdown there. So if you'd like to review these in more detail, they covered it for a full hour. We're just going to cover about the Cliff Notes edition for the top 10 minutes. So this slide gives us kind of a historical context on where where farm income has been, things of that nature. And in recent years, we set, during the onset of COVID, farm income wasn't as good as we hoped for. And if you got through that tough period of time, batten down the hatches, things like that, we have much higher farm income. Now, farm income for this year appears to be lower than what it had been in, say, 2 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, if you look here on the chart. But the thing that sets us apart is there's been different forms of disaster aid paid due to some of the disruptions in trade, some of the prior disasters that we had. Some of the aid was paid out in this year, and we're not getting into the nitty-gritty detail on that. But just know that disaster assistance is what has helped us move farm income forward for this year in Nebraska. And when we talk about the drivers of farm income in Nebraska specifically, and something that really sets us apart as a state compared to our neighbors to the east, is the livestock sales, especially on the beef side of things. And with that, we've seen a breakdown here. The blue line is livestock sales. The green line is crop sales. And then we have disaster payments, or what Brad refers to as government payments here in this lightish orange or brown color. What do we notice? Well, what I have wrote about in some of the information we put out on the farm real estate world, on land values, and maybe some of the things that we're seeing right now, is there might be a tale of two stories. And what I mean by that is when we talk about agricultural land, broadly speaking, we have crop and grazing land compared to grazing land and hay land compared to cropland. And inside of that, right now, the profitability for our crop folks is a lot different expectations than it might be for some of the beef folks. So when we're talking about cash rents, to say, oh, all cash rents went up or all cash rents went down, that's kind of a blanket statement that probably isn't going to be true this upcoming year, because the cash rents typically are tied to profitability and expenses as well. Profitability that's impacted by expenses and crop prices or livestock prices. And we'll see what happens to cash rent here for 2026, but crop prices appear to be off. And when we talk about these different things, some of just the broad expenses, what are on the crop side, the big three are seed, fertilizer, and chemicals. I know many folks are starting to have conversations about ordering some of those things, maybe even prepaying or at least locking down a price. And the input expenses in recent years is something that really has taken off. And also the other expenses that you may not see right here too much, but labor, some manufactured input expenses, interest rates have trended a little bit higher than they've been. During COVID, they came down a little bit. They're back up. But with higher profitability, we always have to be concerned about watching our expenses, whether it's for machinery, inputs, cash rents, land expenses, whatever the case might be. And where are these disaster payments coming from? And this is what this slide, once again, is kind of a historical context since the early 1990s, and the type of different disaster programs we've had. If you recall back in the mid 90s to the late, was it 2014 or 2013, we had a thing called disaster or direct payments. It's a form of disaster payment tied to your base acres. We've had different types of crop programs. In recent years, the ARC and PLC, it doesn't look like there was a huge payments made across our state for ARC or PLC, but there's been a lot of supplemental disaster programs that have made payments. The crop programs, I believe those would be ARC and PLC on here, and the conservation are in green. So our traditional programs, they haven't really been paying out as much, but it's been the ad hoc disaster programs to address some of the different things that have occurred, whether drought, possibly one that might be addressing some of the declining prices we've had on the cropland side. Those projections are definitely some numbers that occur. Those ad hoc disaster payments occur when the need arises surrounding different economic events. Now, there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'm not going to attempt to explain. You could probably spend a half hour on this slide and a half hour on the next slide. I'll give you the big takeaways. One, keep an eye on the Center for Ag Profitability website. I imagine there will be a webinar before our ARC and PLC signups, where Brad Lubin and possibly an FSA representative will be going over some of the changes. One big beautiful bill, OB3, if you have seen that acronym, one big beautiful bill. With the one big beautiful bill, what that is tied to is that there's been some modifications inside of ARC and PLC. Some of the guarantees have been improved. Some of the trigger levels have been modified or changed a little bit. If you recall, for example, the ARC program, we used to talk about 86% as a trigger level. Now it's up to 90%. Well, remember, if we get a payment for the 2025 crop, it basically come a little less than a year from now. So think late September, early October of 2026. And ARC, yes, ARC is a county level revenue based program. They split it up for a lot of counties in Nebraska by cropping practice, irrigated and dry land. So the dry land can trigger and not necessarily the irrigated. But assuming we have trend line yields, not exceptional yields, not really poor yields, it looks like just with the guarantee relative to the current expected marketing year average price. Now, who knows? That's something that could change or turn around. We're still have a long ways to go in the 2025 marketing year, and we still are a long ways out from the 2026 crop, harvesting it and selling it. But it appears, based on some of Dr. Lubin's estimates, Brad Lubin's estimates, that there may be some money associated with the ARC program. And oops, I'm sorry, I skipped the PLC program here. When I went forward in the prior slide, I skipped it. What I just discussed was the ARC program. The PLC program is a national price safety net. So the national price safety net's not concerned about what you're selling your individual crop for, or even what the farmers in your specific county. They're concerned about national marketing or average prices. And this is going to be, once again, tied to your historic base acres. So depending upon who you are, if you have irrigated base or irrigated acres as part of your base, obviously your yields are going to be a little bit higher. And there's been some slight modifications to PLC. The trigger levels and some of those things you'll notice are a little bit better. And it looks at this time, so if you were sitting down to sign up for ARC or PLC today, it looks like we quote unquote might be in the money, meaning our marketing year average prices, our projected prices relative to the guarantees, looks like we might be in the money as well. It looks like ARC might be slightly higher, but nonetheless, when we are facing your decision here for corn and soybeans or wheat or grain sorghum, it looks in that right-hand side there, once again, highlighted by that rectangular red outline there. It looks like depending on the crop, now, for example, if you're paying attention to wheat for the 2025, looks like wheat might be a little bit more favorable. But for PLC, it might be a little bit more favorable. So keep this in mind here for 26 when we're signing up and things like that. But just know that the payments, it definitely looks like there's going to be some disaster assistance coming. This would be tied to mainly the decline in the marketing year average price relative to where some of these guarantees are. I'd suggest if you'd like to dig into these slides, go online, download the PDF when it's posted, and we'll give you an outline of what we have on this slide here for your own personal benefit. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Anastasia to switch over to her slides here just momentarily, and she will give you, so I'm going to stop sharing. Anastasia, go ahead and take control when you're ready.
Okay, we good?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, and one thing I will just piggyback off of what Jim just said. No matter what you signed up for the 2025 marketing year you signed up last March, it doesn't matter. You're going to get paid for ARC, PLC, whichever of the two is the highest. So it doesn't matter what you signed up for last March, but we will probably be signing up again in 6 months or so. Okay, so once again, my name is Anastasia Meyer. I am located in southeast Nebraska, and I am talking to you guys today about landlord-tenant communication. What you guys should be thinking about this time of year as harvest has wrapped up or is wrapping up in different areas. Now's a great time to get out into the field and see if there's any problems out there. Right now, you can see if there's any erosion issues, ditches. Are your terraces, are your outlets being cleaned out like they should be? Make sure that the tenant and the landowners are talking about how to solve these issues. Is it something that you need to hire somebody to come in and fix? Do those major overhauls of your land, whether it's fixing a big problem or a smaller problem? Remember when we talk about the large issues, the stuff that needs the specialty equipment like the dozers? That's typically a landowner expense. So if your tenant has that specialty equipment, are you paying your tenant? Are you offering a longer lease? Those are things that are all up for negotiation. And then also, there been a lot of weed pressure? Some weeds are better controlled in the fall versus in the spring. And so it's a great time to be out there and seeing, do you need a fall application for weed control? Bindweed is one of those that might be a better kill based off of what you're spraying. But again, go out there and see if you're having any issues and if you need to address it now before we move on into when the ground freezes and everything. Okay. A lot of times, oh, I forgot to change this heading here. But a lot of times what we often gets asked is, can I see how the farm yielded? Can I see what the yields were, how it looks like from this year compared to other years? Well, it depends, right? So your crop share, likely you can see what your yields are going to be from year to year to year to year. But when you get into a cash lease or flex lease, it gets a little bit more complicated. A flex lease, you might be able to. A cash lease, the tenant doesn't have to share any past yields with you. So if you want that information, if you want that yield information, you have to have a written lease and you have to ask that it is shared from year to year. Now, one thing I do want to also caution people if they are asking and if the tenant is sharing them is to be aware of things like enterprise units and for crop insurance, because if that's how they are pulling that information to share the yields with you, what an enterprise unit is, it's all the fields in that area. So that usually that section of ground. So if you have a field and they also farm next to you, those are likely going to be combined into one enterprise unit, and it's cheaper insurance, but it might be other fields combined with yours. So make sure that you're asking those questions. Make sure you know the information that you're getting. A lot of times we ask about, well, can we see what the yield data is on the monitor? Can we get those maps? And you can if you ask, and then if they're willing to share for it, they're probably going to be wondering why. Why does the landowner want this? Are they thinking about selling it? So you're gonna need to just be honest and say, are you curious? Are you wanting to share it? Because they don't have to. They don't have to share it, especially any past history, unless it's in the written contract. One thing I will also urge about that is ask if the yield monitor has been if it has had any how precise is it, right? Is it a general map, or have they actually went out and really fine-tuned it and that's the actual what's going on? It's very accurate. And so sometimes, it might not be the exact yields, but you'll see that there is a problem in this corner of the field when the rest of the area is really good. So I would use the map that way, from the from the combine. I would see if the monitor has been, if it's been gone through with a fine tooth comb, or if it's just the plug and play, and then it's just a general idea. Ask those questions. But again, a landowner cannot ask for prior yields, but they can put it in a contract for next year. You can put anything you want in a contract. You just have to have another person to sign it. And then corn stalks is something that we often see forgotten in any contract or any verbal lease agreement. And the question is really, can they be grazed? Should they be grazed? Who gets to graze them? What's the cost? So let's walk through that a little bit. So can they be grazed? Again, if you are having a verbal lease, yes, the tenant can graze those. He can sublease them. Those corn stalks are his. If it's a crop share, a portion of that stalks, that stover in the ground, a portion of it is landowner and a portion of it is a tenant. So what should be the amount charged? Well, again, I have it broken into, is it the tenant actually putting their cattle out there doing the work, grazing those corn stalks, or are they subleasing it to another person? My general rule of thumb is, if your tenant is putting the cattle out there, they are putting up the fence, they are watering them, all of that. They're doing all of the work. It's nothing else on you. I say let them graze it for no additional cost, because you're putting that manure back on, likely getting rid of some trash out there that maybe they don't have to disc up or remove in other ways, or it's easier to plant the next year, whatever the case might be. If it's a tenant's cattle, just go ahead and let them graze it. It gets a little bit more complicated when we talk about subleasing. So your tenant doesn't have any cattle, but they are hiring, or they're getting paid for somebody else to bring cattle on there. So now it depends. Are you in a cash rent or a crop share? If you're a crop share, yes, I think you should be getting a portion of that payment back to you as well, because a portion of those corn stalks are yours. If it's a cash lease, again, that's going to be up for negotiation. A lot of times I get asked about, what are the concerns about grazing those corn stalks? Should we be concerned about compaction? I don't think so. I've seen the data out there that I don't think it's a big concern. But also something to be thinking about is, if you graze those corn stalks, you're likely going to be having a lot less volunteer corn. In that second picture, the volunteer corn in your soybeans potentially next year, that you might be able to get away with not spraying as much chemical to kill that, because the cattle will have ate that corn that's out in the field that's left over. I think the biggest red flag when it comes to corn stalks is, if you need to have something in a contract that considers the amount of corn stalks being removed if it's being baled. And the reason is, we never want any field to be 100% bare. We don't want all of the corn stalks to be removed, because it really opens yourself up for that land to have erosion by wind, by rain, different events. It really exposes that soil. So we want to keep at least maybe 40% on it, to keep it and protect it, so that your ground stays on your ground and not the neighbors, kind of a thing. So remember, if you don't have anything in your contract, if I am renting from you and you terminate me, I can go and bale 100% of those corn stalks, and it's well within my rights, especially if I'm in a cash lease. Now, if I'm crop share, I can only do my portion. So make sure that your corn stalks baling, you have a clause in there that limits the amount removed, because you just want to protect your land. And a hot topic right now, deer season is here for rifle. So the big question is deer season, who gets to hunt? Well, again, it depends on what kind of lease you have. Do you have a verbal lease or a written lease? So let's talk about cropland verbal leases first. Again, any tenant that is renting your ground for cropland has all of the rights, including hunting, fishing, they can log it, whatever the case might be, from March to the end of February. They have complete control of that ground in a verbal lease. So who gets to hunt in this scenario? It is the tenant. They can sublease it out to a hunting outfitter. They can let every single friend they have on it hunt. And if you, as a landowner, want to hunt, guess what? You could actually have trespassing charges on you for hunting your own ground because the tenant has those rights. And so, again, if you have a written lease and nothing is mentioned about hunting, those hunting rights goes with the tenant. Verbal pasture leases are a little bit different because those tenants have all of the rights during only those 5 months out of the year. So my second picture here, all the different hunting guides. Who has the hunting rights in this scenario? Well, it really depends on what are you hunting. If you're just concerned about rifle season for deer, you're probably okay. Those cattle are going to be removed by deer season rifle. Um, but if you are a bow hunter or if you maybe want to hunt other species, again, does it coincide with that grazing season? The best thing you can do is to get it in writing because it's not real unless it is in writing. So, what do we want to go for 2026, right? What do we want to do? The big questions that we are always asked is how should we be adjusting for the next year? What do we think is going to happen? Well, right now we're seeing a lot of crop prices. The predictions are very similar to this year. Government payments, they're likely going to be decreased. Those ad hoc, the ECAP payments, the livestock indemnity payments, those are likely going to be decreased. And input costs are very high for producers, and there's a lot of uncertainty regarding crop prices and even beef prices right now as well. So how do we adjust? I think everybody, every producer, landowner, whoever it is in a crop share or flex lease should really be pushing that pencil and paper and see if their split is truly equitable, right? Are they paying in the appropriate amount and getting the appropriate amount back, right? And your cash leases, how are you adjusting the price per acre? Really, I think we're going to see a lot of them stay the same, maybe go down a little bit. That's what I'm hearing. That's kind of what I'm seeing. But again, we don't have those concrete numbers in yet, and we won't until March timeline kind of a thing. So if you're sitting there and talking to your tenant right now, be aware of these different things. I heard one farmer say it's just not really fun to farm right now because of all the uncertainty and they don't need to gamble. And so just be aware of these things and know that in some different areas, harvest is really dragging on. So keep that communication going between both parties and you guys can work through a lot of things just by talking with each other. Again, it might be too late to legally terminate your verbal lease for this year. Again, we needed to have that done prior to September 1. However, if you do want to go to a written lease, explain it to your tenant of why you want it. It protects you, it protects them, protects both parties, and it also has I like it when all the duties for each parties are written out in the contract. And that really protects your heirs and their heirs as well. We want to know, we want to make sure that your heirs are taken care of, that they don't feel like they are being taken advantage of. We want to have that in writing so that we can refer back to it. Um, you know, a lot of times unforeseen passing of the other party, they don't know how much to pay, they don't know what shares are, what is their responsibility. And so we need to do a better job of training our heirs to take over the piece of ground. And the first thing we can do is put that lease in writing. I think gone are the days of my grandparents. I've never had a written contract. If I can't have a written contract, I don't trust you. I don't want it. I think gone are those days. If we want to keep the ground in our family's name for years and years and years to come. We got to train ourselves and the next generation to manage that piece of ground. And so again, I always like to bring this up. Ag Lease 101 is a great resource. If you click on Document Library, you have all of these different forms available to you. I think the lease forms are great to go through and pull whichever items you need. I don't think anybody should just blindly be signing any contract because, that's what it's online. Really read through and see if those clauses or those that is applicable to you. One example in the cash rent lease and crop share, it doesn't allow grazing. So if you just print that off and blindly sign it, guess what? You can't graze your cattle anymore, even if you guys thought that might be okay. And I think that's been a recent change in the last 5 years. So just be aware of that. And now we're going to go into Ask the Experts here. I'm going to pass this next slide off to Jim.
Hey, so before we switch to gears here, we had just one question here in the chat pane that was pertaining to some of the yield sharing that you were discussing, Anastasia.
Okay.
It
All right.
says,
Go ahead.
it says here, I have a question for Anastasia related to the yield data sharing. Are there formal guidelines or strategies that allows a tenant or landowner to monetize their data sharing?
You could relate, if you want to monetize your data, you could show this would be a great way, especially if you're in a crop share situation, that you are paying for the technology that the one example, I just had a landowner and her tenant asked her to pay for a portion of the technology fees associated with precision ag. And so really like this would be one way that maybe the yields could show that it was beneficial. We did a lot of other math to show like if she did, if she didn't, that kind of a thing. But this would be one way to monetize that this technology, this data sharing is worth it. That would be one thing. It's everyone's going to be a little bit different. If you, I get a little bit nervous on setting like cash rental prices on the yield data just because when was the last time was that monitored, really calibrated? Was it this year? Was it last year? That kind of a thing. But I would say probably the biggest thing was be the precision agriculture and showing that if it's valuable or not, and how to monetize it that way.
All right, very good. Okay, so we had a couple of questions here that we're going to go over that I hopefully those folks are still on will gain a little more insight from. So the question is, where are land prices and cash rents headed? Are they going higher? Are they going lower? Are they leveling off? Are they dropping off? Where are things at? Well, I've seen a couple land sales in just my area of the state, and it seems like some of them are fairly steady still. Now, they were very in demand areas, you might say. Markets are still very. There are other sales I've seen when things are maybe down a little bit too. The two fundamental things I want to keep an eye on is one, what is the profitability looking like? So maybe cropland comes down a little bit, maybe grazing land is a little bit higher. I guess we'll see. Remember the slide that Brad Lubin shared with us on some of the farm income projections related to prices. It looks like the crop receipts are definitely trending down some, but the livestock receipts being led by beef prices, feeder cattle, fat cattle, live cattle, whatever the case might be, is definitely trending a little bit higher. So the value of what we have relates to value of what is legally and permissibly able to be done on that property. So crop prices is something, and I should probably update this. I think the marketing average price of corn is probably a little bit under $4, 3.90 or so. But nonetheless, that is definitely one thing to be keeping an eye on. And the other thing, if you want to go to the next slide here, on
I want to interject real fast. When we talk about marketing year average, so that's not a January to December timeline. It starts at harvest and it's weighted on when that grain is sold. So it's primarily the harvest to January timeline. But that's always why we are a year late in payments.
Yeah. It's harvest to 1 year till harvest of the following year, basically, is the way that we think about it. And obviously, if you have winter wheat, it gets thinking about that time frame is different than what it looks like for corn or soybeans. The other thing is input expenses. Anastasia's discussed this with you folks. Interest rates, you've seen the federal funds rate. Some of those things have been cut a little bit, but last article I seen on the T-bill rate this morning from CNBC was just slightly over 4%. So interest rates, I'm not suggesting we're making a line of credit loans or even a loan for our package of land at 4%, but it just goes to show you that the indication on long-term loans are much higher now than they were, say, prior to COVID. Now, during COVID, interest rates got really low, and some folks took advantage to refinance some of their long-term obligations, which is fine. But I would suspect lines of credits here, depending on who you are, maybe anywhere from 7.5 to 8.5, depending on your financial circumstances. So if you're someone that wants all the cash rent upfront day one when the lease is signed, just remember if someone has to borrow that money, your cash rent's going to be trending a lot higher because until they get that line of credit paid off, they'll have to be bearing an interest expense associated. So my crystal ball would say that it's going to be continually based on where are you at in the States. Some areas markets are still pretty warm. Some areas maybe not quite as much. And also the type of land. Is it grazing land, hay land, or is it? Those are going to be the big things because the value, profitability of all these different things greatly varies based on who you are located. I think the next couple of questions are for you, so go ahead.
Yep. Okay, so this one here is if you have a piece of ground and you know that you're going to sell it, the current lease ends on the last day of February. Does notification need to be given? So technically, no. If that lease is done on the last day of February, you don't need to let them know via termination letter that you are selling the ground and that their lease is ending. However, we do really recommend that professional courtesy of let them know as soon as you can that you want to sell the ground. You might even get an offer from them, which would be great. But if not, they know how to plan their purchasing of seed, fertilizer, everything else, especially if it's been something that you guys just continually just sign a new contract every single year. Maybe they were thinking that they were just going to keep it. As soon as you know big changes are happening, let the other party know. And again, the biggest question is always going to be, is your lease in writing and what does it say? Okay, do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing any come in right now. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into either the Q&A or the chat pane, and we'll be sure to take those. I wanted to point out here, we have a handful of meetings, and I suspect we'll probably add a few more here. But starting here in early December, we need to get our slides updated for this. We're going to be hosting our annual landlord tenant cash rent workshops. We'll be kicking off in Seward on December 4th, Auburn on December 9th. December 11th will be in Scottsbluff. And you'll note for all those locations, in addition to the ones we have on this slide and the following slide, all please call ahead to register. We are in December and we haven't really got a big shot of snow yet, but I'm sure it's around the corner here. So please call ahead, make sure to get registered. And if the meeting has to be postponed or canceled, just be aware that we have a variety of locations. And you can visit that cap.unl.edu/land26. And if there's any meetings, I know there will be some, we just haven't set the dates. But by all means, you are more than welcome to attend any of these. In addition to those, I'll be after the first of the year. I'm sure there'll be some central Nebraska and some of the surrounding areas. So with that, we made pretty good time today. Hopefully we didn't cover any of the material too terribly fast, but appreciate everyone getting on, and just know that Monday, February 16th, 2026, I have to get used to saying that. 2026 is just right around the corner here in a few months. We'll be covering a variety of topics. We'll be looking at some of the things surrounding setting cash rents. Once again, an update on leases, things that we need to be thinking about. And it really, if anyone has any detailed questions, especially if you think, and we never disclose, okay, you know, the tract of land is in this county in this township, but if you have a question you feel other people might be interested in, by all means, please submit it to on our website for a land management quarterly, and we'll actually create some slides at the end of the presentation trying to highlight or respond to your questions or concerns that you're expressing. So Anastasia, do you have anything else to add to that? I think that was our last slide there.
Yep. Can you sleep? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I do want to just bring highlight to this Cornhusker Economics Ag Outlook meetings. We're going to have 4 across the state, and it's really going to be covering the big changes happening right now, the tax changes, the different ag policy outlook. There's a lot been going on in ag policy. The farm bill wording got extended another year. The government reopened, you know, the different farm program decisions. The financial outlook, everything. That's all coming up. We're going to again have 4 meetings across the state. You can find more information at cap.unl.edu/outlook. If I'm sure we're going to be doing some more information on this virtually, but I really think that these meetings in person are going to be very beneficial. We're going to have some great people come and talk in addition to Jim and I and our counterparts across the state.
Very good. Yeah, be sure to get those. You're going to have a variety of speakers at those events. So if you have the time, free and open to the public once again. So be sure to attend if you have the time. Okay, with that, unless you have anything else to add, I think we're going to get done a few minutes early this time, but appreciate everyone and Happy New Year to everyone that's attending still. Be sure to see you again in 2026.